everyone, I'm you, Buster Green, and I'm doing something slightly different today. So, some news came out this week that they released some brand new Gundam Blu-rays in the US. First off, there's the funny enough Gundam-san, a original Gundam gag manga that somehow got turned into an anime, and it's great if you're a super fan of the original Gundam and you want to make jokes about it. Next up, there is the original Gundam Build Beginning OVA, the OVA that launched the Wrong Running Gunpla Builders series almost 10 years ago. Now, this OVA isn't perfect, but I do have an intense sort of respect for it for where it went, and especially since I actually did attend the 2010 Plastic Mall Expo in Japan, the real-world event that the OVA is sort of based around. I ate a Turkish kebab there. The last Blu-ray that came out this week is Gundam Twilight Axis, a series that I can't really say is actually a series. It's actually just a disjointed series of anime cuts that aired online a billion years ago. Anyway, I'm going to talk about Twilight Axis today because I had to wonder, since it's being re-released, is Twilight Axis the worst Gundam series ever? Let's go over it. On the pitch, Twilight Axis promises to be an amazing Gundam story. It promises to be a story about ghosts and new types, and it wraps up the loose ends from Gundam 0080, Double Zeta, and CCA. However, despite all that promise, in execution this anime is kind of a failure. Twilight Axis is a complete mess. If you had to ask me right now, I think Twilight Axis really is the worst Gundam series ever made. Worse than both SD Gundam Force, which was made for children, and G-Savior, which was made for Canadians. In my mind, Twilight Axis is an outright disaster because it failed the basic requirement of just telling a good Gundam story that people could understand, which is an extra fail since most of the time Gundam is fundamentally about understanding. Supposedly the reason this anime is so inaccessible is because it wasn't even supposed to be an anime at all. The anime is not the product, the anime is the commercial. The anime Gundam Twilight Axis is just a commercial for the Twilight Axis light novel series and or their 20-volume manga adaptation, which tell the same story but with pictures. And yeah, it's a 20-story book. This anime just exists to be a commercial for the books. So yeah, it's a failure. It's not an anime, it's not self-contained, it's just a big half-hour commercial for a book that is probably never going to come out in my country and probably yours either, unless you're living in Japan. Once again, this whole thing makes me kind of shocked and surprised that they decided to release it at all, and they have the gall to charge people money for it. Now sure, this shit happens all the time. There were plenty of one-shot animes made back in the day to promote sprawling and incomprehensible manga series, and some of them have even become like world famous in their own right, like Akira, Nausicaa, 5-Star Stories. All these amazing anime movies just existed to be commercials for the manga. But Gundam, on the other hand, doesn't really usually do that. Gundam's at least a little bit better when they do this. Like, the last amazingly well-received Gundam novel series was Gundam Unicorn, and that series was so beloved that it got an equally beloved and equally as well-crafted anime run. So, Twilight Axis, in my opinion, is kind of just a strange mess from Sunrise Studios, who otherwise have an impeccable record when it comes to making anime. Now, that being said, because I need some extra content to get my channel monetized, I'm going to give Twilight Axis one last shot and see if the new Blu-ray makes me feel any different about it, see if this version makes any more sense than the last time I watched it, and to see if this time I can watch it and understand what the fuck was going on in the story, because it's a really hard to understand story. And ironically, because Twilight Axis was such a forgettable flash in the pan, even though I watched it when it came out, I've literally forgotten everything about this anime except for there was a Gundam, there was a Red Zaku, and the story took place in Axis, which was very, very faithful to its depiction in Double Zeta Gundam. So yeah, let me do a quick summary of the story as I watch it again, for probably the last time in my life, I want to hope. So this movie starts in a beautiful summer field where a beautiful girl is walking through a daisy field, and immediately she has a vision of Lala Soon being rescued by Char's Gelgoot in the Texas colony from the original Gundam anime. Later, we flash forwards to see the same girl standing on the surface of Axis in front of the wreck of the Sazabi. Then, a man-bun hipster dry cleaner man takes over the story and has a talk with some dude, and apparently this all takes place in the city of Axis in Double Zeta Gundam. Anyway, the main girl is this girl named Arlette, and she's part of this group of former Zeon refugees who are going to Axis to retrieve something related to Char's legacy. But when they show up inside of Axis, a Gundam shows up and finds them and starts lasering them to death with its beam rifle. The Gundam is the Gundam Tristan. It's an upgraded Gundam Alex, which somehow, despite the efforts of Bernie Wiseman, it wasn't totaled at the end of 0080 and someone eventually fixed it up, and here it is. Arlette continues to have these weird dreams of Char Aznable, and we get another quick shot of the Sazabi laying dead on Axis. Arlette and then some other guy fly towards Char's unused Zaku 3, which is new to the series. Then we get a full flashback to like the 0080 time period when Arlette was 12 years old. She had fixed up Char's Yelgug and it was being stored on Axis. And then some dude launches off in Char's Zaku 3 as Arlette continues monologuing that she's extremely obsessed with Char Aznable. The Gundam Tristan goes on its rampage and it keeps trying to beam rifle to death the Zeon salvage team, but because they're tiny little people, it can't hit them and it's just kind of shooting wildly. The Char Zaku 3 launches and engages with the Gundam in combat. It pulls out its beam machine gun and it does the classic Zaku shoulder tackle, and then they have a beam saber clash and the Zaku draws first blood. Now, the Zaku seemingly has the edge in this battle, but its pilot is a guy named Danton. He's the guy from the laundry map before, and he's too cowardly to kill anyone, so he just lets the Gundam live. Then a Biolant comes out, and it's kind of like a pinky purple Biolant. Anyway, then we get another flashback that Danton was court-martialed because he can't kill anyone in combat. And then while he's having that flashback, the Zaku gets its arm cut off. Danton quickly uses the Zaku to shoot away some of the asteroid wall to create a dust storm. And while he's shooting wildly, a water tank falls on the Biolant and crushes it and traps it. But then the Biolant saws off its own leg to get free, and then while it's freeing itself, the Gundam Tristan also reactivates. So the Gundam grabs the Biolant, and after a quick stare down, they both peacefully leave the area. Danton lands the Zaku, but then somehow disorientingly, we flash to a different time and place, where now suddenly he has an Arjarja instead of the Char Zaku. Meanwhile, the Gundam has gone to somewhere else, the Gundam pilot gets out, and the Gundam pilot is some badass guy with long blonde hair. Then the Zeon salvage team goes up to the surface of Axis to look for the Sazabi. I guess they're trying to retrieve either its flight recorder or Char's body. Anyway, Arlette then has another flashback to the 1-year war where she met Lala Soon. Seemingly on the day Lala died, Lala exploded one of the Saikamu bits from the Elmeth in front of her and showed her this weird like hostility territorialism towards Char, and that kind of scared Arlette psychically. Then she has another flashback to a time when she was taking a bus, and then this goes into a music video about how she had a relatively peaceful life on Axis between the time of the first Gundam to Zeta Gundam. At this point, the movie turns into a weird music video where we get a real nice look at what normal life was like in Axis. In general, it kind of looks like 1980s Hong Kong. It has that sort of vibe, lots of neon lights. Anyway, Arlette then lets on that she worked under Char from basically the time she was a teenager until she was in her mid-20s. But despite that, she was just an engineer, and Char never really acknowledged her personally or like cared for her as a woman, despite the fact she was very much in love with him. And finally, she worked with Char one last time during the development of the Sazabi during CCA, and now Char's dead. Anyway, she finally finds the Sazabi's wreck. Char's escape pod is long gone, but shockingly, the Sazabi is almost entirely intact, which could lead to some really interesting future developments. Elsewhere, a spaceship is destroyed, and a mysterious mobile suit resembling the Double Zeta Gundam, but with new type fin funnels that have beam sabers on them, comes out of the shadows. Arlette salvages some of the Sazabi, but then she sees the mobile suits are coming, so she flips out and abandons it. So the Tristan pilot comes back into frame now, and it looks like he has some sort of mobile armor sled thing. It's kind of like the Dendrobium from 0083. At the same time, Arlette comes out in her own mobile armor, and it's a very CCA Double Zeta Unicorn sort of ridiculous mobile armor thing. So they have this insane mobile armor fight, and the fight is almost blow for blow an echo of the battle from 0083 between the New Zeal and the Dendrobium. But this time we're rooting for the Zeon side because Arlette is cute and the Gundam pilot is a psycho. Anyway, so yeah, Arlette's unit is pretty much the New Zeal all over again, but this time it has funnels and it's red. That looks a lot like the New Zeal 2 from G Generation, so I'm just going to assume it's that thing. Anyway, the Tristan pilot has gone from silent to a violent psychopath at this point, and I don't like him anymore. The two of them exchange missile fire, and the Gundam takes out the Zeal's eye field. Then the Gundam has some kind of bit remote launcher, kind of like the old Bravo from the original Gundam. Arlette's not expecting that because it's like a retro weapon, so she ends up having to do a mega output blast to try and like just fry the entire battlefield and take out the beam launchers. Anyway, she does that, but then that kind of wrecks her mobile armor. The Gundam finally catches up to her and tries to like rip her apart with these like giant claw machine things. Arlette manages to stop them with its tiny beam saber arms, which again is a new Zeal callback. And then she successfully manages to repel the Gundam, so it retreats again. Now at this point, Danton shows up and you think he's going to rescue Arlette, but instead of rescuing her in the middle of a war zone, they have a surprisingly sobering conversation that maybe it's about time they stop worshipping Char Asimov since he's been dead for a little bit. And then Arlette starts crying because essentially while all this madness is going on, he's like trying to break up with her, and it's like ridiculous. Like he like leaves her in the middle of a war zone while she's crying and begging him not to leave, and he's just like, yeah, I think it was a bad idea that we dated for the last 8 years. And she's like, I'm gonna get shot. And it's like, what? Anyway, so the Gundam meanwhile comes back at this point because he sees Danton fucking around. So he ditches his armor and just comes back as the Gundam. And then the Gundam as itself like tries to like kill Danton as he's like running away and like being a bad boyfriend. And Arlette can't do anything because her mobile armor is just too wrecked at this point. And then she has another flashback to her childhood where seemingly she was number 7 of the Flanagan New Type Lab research children. And anyway, she freaks out, remembering how bad her childhood was. And this causes her to activate the Psycho Frame in the New Zeal, which causes a big, massive ore explosion. And then she has all these like awful flashbacks of like how she was a child experiment and how all her friends starved to death and how she nearly starved to death too, until Char Asimov rescued her, and that's the reason why she dedicated her life to Char Asimov. Anyway, the Psycho Frame like explodes and it seems like maybe everyone died. Danton and Arlette are suddenly back in the flower field from the start of the film, implying that maybe they're dead now, or maybe this is a flashback, or maybe it's a flash forward to the future. Anyway, then we go back to the Tristan pilot, seemingly in a flashback to him, or maybe he escaped because it's unclear. And then we go full circle to the laundromat again, where now Arlette is in the laundromat, implying that they went back to Axis and they lived a happy life. But the laundromat doesn't exist anymore, so this has to be in the past. Oh my god, this show jumps around way too much. Anyway, then finally we go back to the current timeline where everyone has just stopped fighting, because I guess when the Psycho Frame exploded, it like wrecked everyone's mobile suits. So I guess the movie's over now. There's a little bit more animation in the ending, but it's just like Arlette slowly reaching her hand towards nothing and thinking about Char and her childhood. And okay, at the end, her and Danton seem to get together. Okay, so wow, this is a mess. Okay, so let me just try to close my thoughts here. The show is odd. It's a massive miss at a time where Gundam was churning out a bunch of really nice, really small OVAs, and a bunch of like similar shows came out around the same time as this that all did great, but this one's a failure. Like Gundam Thunderbolt and Narrative both came out around the same time as this one, and they both managed to tell original, cool, standalone Gundam stories that were all like within canon. And those were really well received, but the big difference between those and this is that both of those were 3 times longer than this. I mean, hell, even Gundam Hathaway, like, Hathaway had beautiful animation, but fundamentally it only felt like an overblown first episode of an anime, or maybe like 2 first episodes tied together. Whereas this is like them trying to do a whole series in like 20 minutes, and it's a mess. It leaves me wondering if they're like, could have been a successful version of this if they had just given it a little bit more time. Like, it feels like an unfinished, uncooked product. Okay, so I know I just did a whole summary of this story, but I'm going to do a whole summary again, and this time I'm going to do a summary where I disassemble the movie and reassemble it timeline-wise from start to finish, because so much of this movie is out of order. Alright, so Twilight Axis is just seemingly the life story of Arlette Almaje, a Zeon new type girl who, like, adored Char Asimov and like how she went from being a child to an adult. So it starts out where she's this new type child in the Xeon Flanagan Research Institute. Now, seemingly the original Gundam made this seem like a pretty small organization that mostly did like mobile suit and mobile armor development and had like a handful of new types. But in this story, they dropped that. They experimented on a bunch of children, they killed a bunch of them, they didn't feed them, and it's a pretty sad retcon that makes old Doc Flanagan turn into a monster. Anyway, however, one day, Char decided to shut down all this shit, so he rescued Arlette, and Arlette then became obsessed with dedicating her life to Char Aspel for saving her life. It's kind of similar to what happened with Lala too, but anyway, so Arlette starts working with Char during the 1 Year War, and at this time she meets Dalton, who is a Rickdom pilot, and he's forced to be a test pilot because he can't kill anyone, even in the middle of the 1 Year War. Time goes by, and Arlette eventually gets on Lala's bad side as a rival for attention with Char, despite the fact that she's a fucking 12-year-old girl, and I'm pretty sure her and Char were hooking up at this time. So Lala's anger toward Arlette caused her to explode one of the LMF's bits. Maybe Lala did this on purpose, maybe she did it on accident, or maybe she was just trying to scare the kid and freak her out. Anyway, but then the next day Lala dies and the 1 Year War ends, and then we have a vague understanding that Arlette and Dalton lived peacefully together in Axis for a couple of years and became adults. Dalton opened up a dry cleaning business, and he and Arlette continued to live together as a makeshift war family where they had like a father-daughter relationship, even though they're seemingly only like 8 years apart in age. Then during this time, I guess she developed the Char Zaku 3, but Char left to become Quattro, so it never got used. Now, this isn't in the movie, but I'm assuming just based on the timeline that she probably passively participated in Double Zeta as an engineer, and then seemingly she was indirectly reunited with Char during CCA because she was part of the development team for the Sazabi. And that finally wraps up the flashbacks. At the start of this anime, Dalton has moved his dry cleaners to another location in space, but some dude commissions him and Arlette to recover the Sazabi from Axis. Arlette is still crazy obsessed with Char, so she eagerly agrees, and Dalton decides to go too because he has his own reasons to go back to Axis, and I think he's being paid well. However, it all goes to shit when they arrive there, and there's just a Gundam there with no explanation. My best guess is the Fetties put it there as security, and the pilot is a one-note psychopath. I don't even know his name. He's not worth talking about. They manage to recover the Char Zaku 3 out of storage, and they try to use it to destroy the Gundam, but a Byrlant shows up, and because Dalton can't kill anyone, the Gundam escapes. Then some time passes, and they finally find the Sazabi wreck, but then the Gundam comes back. It shows up again with its mobile armor attachment, and somehow Arlette whips out the Ahava Azario. Oh, this thing was an Azario? Oh, okay, sure, whatever. Anyway, the Azario and the Tristan fight each other to a stalemate, and then weirdly, in the middle of the battle, Dalton chooses that it's this time to dump her, which is a massive dick move on his part. Now, I can kinda understand it because, yeah, she's not like the most stable person. She's obviously still extremely obsessed with Char years after he died, but still, absolutely horrible timing to dump this girl in the middle of a life and death, like, violent crime situation because the Gundam is back at this point trying to kill him. So finally, all this freaks her out, and this triggers her to have a new type of Aurora Shockwave thingy, which seemingly disables everyone's mobile suits, bringing a stop to the battle, but not really concluding any of the plot points that have all been unraveled through the movie. Like, where are they gonna go? Is this really the end? Now they're stuck in space with the Gundam pilot. It just ends there, so you have no idea what the hell happened next. Are they gonna get the Sazabi back? To find out what happens next, you have to buy all 20 volumes of the novel and or the manga and read the real story. So yeah, I'm gonna stand by my initial call that this is sadly the worst Gundam media thing ever produced. And it's not for lack of trying or not having a good story idea, it's that they just didn't dedicate themselves enough time to tell the story properly, so that leaves it being nothing more than a long-ass commercial. Arlette herself is a neat protagonist. I kind of like that she went from being a seemingly low self-esteem engineer to revealing that she had this fucked up childhood and this relationship to Char. Danton was okay. All he really has going for him is that he won't kill anyone, so he's quirky. But yeah, this anime unsatisfies me so much. Like, I have just so many questions about the story now that it's over. Like, You get no character development at all for the Gundam pilot, so what was his deal? Was he a bad guy? Why was he crazy? Was he a cyber new type? And you also have to assume that the Tristan is just either the repaired Gundam Alex from the end of 0080 or a weird throwback design with a lot of the same quirks. I kind of only buy that it could be the repaired Gundam Alex. I don't believe they would make another one this late in the game. I really would have loved a even slight explanation of what the hell the deal was with that. And then I'm super unclear what their objective was for salvaging the Sazabi. Were they salvaging it for parts? Were they salvaging it to repair it? Other than the fact Arlette worked on it, was she just compelled to get it back because Char had died and maybe had some clues to his death? There was also that mysterious benefactor who seemingly funded the salvage operation in the first place, but you have no idea what his deal was. And what really upsets me about this anime, all the mobile suits in this piece, they're just really frustratingly unexplained. Like, I have no clue where Sharzaku 3 actually came from. Was it hiding underground? Was it in a warehouse somewhere? It was seemingly just abandoned after the fight, and then Dalton went back to using his Arjarja, which also doesn't make sense. Like, where'd the Arjarja come from? It's kind of unclear why he switched suits like that. And similarly with the Azeryu, where did that come from? I'm inclined to think that was also stored on Axis somewhere abandoned, but I fundamentally don't know because it seems like it could have been something they brought with them. It makes me think it came from the CCA time period, but the overall design looks pretty Double Zeta too, so it could have gone either way. In the end, this is a really hard anime to judge. I mean, I would say it's worse than G-Savior because even though G-Savior was a cheap, badly made movie, this is also badly made, but it's worse because it really could have been good if it just had a little bit more runtime. It doesn't go over anything except the bare bones of who Arlette and Dalton are and their vague relationship with Char and Lala and each other, and also the two mobile suit battles, which are so kind of inconclusive and badly animated that I can't really follow the logic of them. I feel like Twilight Axis is pretty much a failure of a project because if it just was even 5 or 10 minutes longer, it could have been better. It could have been better than it is right now. Because rewatching it now, even though I understand it more this time than the first time I watched it, it's still a real mess of an episode full of plot holes and unexplained contrivances and just things that really frustrate me. If they ever did another episode of this, maybe that would help the story, but the way it currently is, I don't think it's even worth doing another episode. I think if they ever wanted to revisit Gundam Twilight Axis, they should probably just do the whole story over again and take more time with the individual elements and what the hell's going on, because this first episode just gives you so little about what's going on. If you're a collector, Twilight Axis is okay, but I'm really shocked that they had the gall to release this thing the first time, and I'm shocked even more now that they would release it again as a Blu-ray and charge people money for it. Because I wouldn't spend money on this. This is a fucking commercial that doesn't make sense. It's honestly something they should have just given away for free as a DVD extra feature with Gundam Narrative or something. I cannot, in my good judgment, recommend this product to anyone because it's just so incomplete and so commercial. Alright, anyway, that's my take on Gundam Twilight Axis. Let me know if you felt differently about it, and let me know if maybe the manga is better, because I'm sure if you read the manga, I'm sure this makes a lot more sense, but I'm just judging it as is without reading the manga, because that's the way they're presenting it in America. Alright, later guys. Please watch some more of my videos. I'm very close to getting monetized, and it's really driving me nuts. Alright, bye.